أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الحكيم وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قالوا أجئتنا لنعبد الله وحده ونذر ما كان يعبد آباؤنا فأتنا بما تعدنا إن كنت من الصادقين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I begin in the name of Allah, the most kind, the most merciful. It's due to that kindness and mercy that we have these opportunities where we gather in remembrance and glorification of Him Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. I pray all of you are well, inshaAllah. I think per the schedule, this is the last lecture after Maghrib for this Ramadan, so you can rest assured it'll be earlier, inshaAllah, going forward. I've been asked by our team in the back, for anybody who's in the gym, they need everybody to move out of the gym so they can clean up and be prepared for the program that's happening after, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So we have been discussing the story of Prophet Hud alayhi salam and the people of Ad. And where we have reached to in this story was that Nabi Hud alayhi salam began his tabligh, basically, his preaching to the people of Ad and their rejection of it. First, their rejection was on the grounds that who are you, right? Like, why are you here? If God really wanted to give us a message, God would have sent angels to us. When that was refuted, their next argument was to become petty in their argument. They began calling names. They called him a liar, they called him a fool. He refuted that with the best of akhlaq. Now we come to another argument that they present. And again, you see that these are all arguments, right? These are all anything that they are trying to present that would be accepted by Prophet Hud, but obviously nothing would be accepted for him or by him. And so the next argument they give is from Surah Al-A'raf, verse number 70. They say, قالوا أجئتنا لنعبد الله وحده ونذر ما كان يعبد آباؤنا. He says, you have come to us and told us to worship one God, Allah, but and you want us to leave that which our forefathers used to worship? Yeah. And so now they give this argument that, again, it's a very similar argument that we see most of the other prophets had to deal with. That why would we leave something that our forefathers have been doing? And not only is this argument rooted in culture, but it's also rooted in comfort, isn't it? Like we have done something a certain way for a certain amount of time, and that action or those actions have brought us comfort, has brought us wealth, have brought us success. And so why should we leave that which our forefathers have been doing? This idea of sticking to that which our forefathers have done, that which our community has done, in Arabic is known as asabiya. Yeah, and if you recall, I think it was 5 years ago, we did an entire series on asabiya, because asabiya it's translated as bigotry or partisanship, where I align myself with someone due to certain connections that we have, be it of skin color, be it of culture, be it of race. and I'm willing to accept all the negative things that they do as okay because they are my people, right? And this is known as bigotry or partisanship, and in Arabic it is known as asabiya. And the reason we had even discussed that subject of asabiya is because it was asabiya that was one of the main causes of why Karbala took place in the first place. You wonder why 30,000 people, there were not few of them who could say, you know what, this is wrong to fight the grandson of the Prophet, this is wrong to fight and kill children, it's wrong to imprison women. No, they didn't. Why? Because their cultural ties were so strong that they failed to accept the truth that was right in front of them. And this is something that Allah Azza wa Jal warns us about, the concept of asabiyah. We see asabiyah in the world that we live in today in the geopolitical spectrum, right? The support of Israel, even though Israel is entirely on the wrong in killing civilians and children, yet countries will continue to support them for no other reason than we've always supported them. And so we will continue to support them. And obviously, there could be other financial and racial ties that are there that are holding them together. But the idea of bigotry is something that is there on the outside of our existence. But what we as believers have to be very careful of is that our attachment to Islam and to the practices of Islam are not based on this asabiyah as well. That means I am doing these things because my forefathers have been doing these things. Rather, the understanding should be, or the growth should be, that I am doing these things because these things are right. We all learn through imitation. Right? Asabiyah, bigotry, is not something that starts off out of a vacuum, right? But rather, asabiyah or bigotry starts first and foremost out of imitation. I imitate things that I see in my childhood, and the things that I imitate now seem to be right for me. They bring me happiness and they bring me success, and then I forge my identity around those things. You know what I mean? Like I've given this example before. Like my daughter does matam, for example. Now she is doing matam not because she has this profound love for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. She does, I'm sure, but she does it because she sees her mom doing it. She sees her sister doing it. She sees her father doing it. And so the people at mosque are doing it. And so they learn to do matam. That's all of us, how we started with our love for Aba Abdullah. And then as we grew up, we began to attach ourselves and love Aba Abdullah. Not because others loved Aba Abdullah, right? And so that growth is expected in our religion. Okay? That there are things that we do a certain way, but we have to understand why is it that we are doing that. And if we don't, then we are on that border of, well, it will be difficult for us to give it up if it happens that what we're doing is incorrect. And this is the thing that Allah teaches us in these stories or in these verses. You know, I gave a lecture about 3 months ago, or maybe it was about 5 months ago, on the importance of being creative in practicing our religion. Yeah, I don't know if you recall that, but it was a 2-part series on the importance of how to bring creativity to our religion. And in that I said that there are 2 aspects of our religion. One is the religious side of it. That is where we do the things that Allah expects us to do. And then there is another side of it, which is the cultural aspect of our religion, the language with which we recite in, for example, the programming and how it's done, the food that we eat. Nothing against religion in any of these things, but these are the cultural adaptation of what God expects from us. Our attachment has to be on that religious side and the cultural side. As long as that cultural side is not violating what religion says, there's nothing wrong with accepting that as part of practicing our religion, right? But if it ever comes to a point where someone suggests a better way of doing it, then we don't really have a ground to stand on to say, no, you can't change it because our forefathers have always been doing it this way. You understand how that all transpired, right? And I know we're tired, but again, you understood how that happened, right? So if someone suggests something else, as long as the religious is done, we have no ground to say, no, you can't do it. Why? On what ground? What will we tell them? Kana aba'una yaf'alun. Exactly what these people said. But our forefathers have always been doing it like this. What do you mean you don't want to change it, right? And that's where we have to be very careful about. Because there are certain things that are not essential, right? They are more periphery. And these are the things that we end up sometimes, we end up prioritizing. You know what I mean? Like I remember I had gone to a community and to recite majlis. I won't tell you where, but maybe some of you will know. And so we did the program, the majlis, the marsha happened, the majlis happened, the matam happened, the ziyarat happened. And so I turn around to like shake people's hand. Everybody's like, sit down. And I was like, what happened? They're like, we do Yasin now. And I was like, seriously? Like that was brand new to me, right? Like in the sense that we finished the program and now they do Yasin and I at the end. And so I was the only one looking around like, what's happening here, right? Because I wasn't used to it, but they were used to it. And I asked why. They said, well, the sponsors always say that we can't make it on time, so we do Yasin at the end. And I said, subhanallah, right? Like, subhanallah, that like you've accepted this as a norm, like because that's all you know. And so the children, that's all they know. And they consider that as a norm. And so when they come to our centers, they look at us as being weird, right? Well, we looked at, and so these are those periphery things that if God forbid one recited Yasin earlier, you know what would happen? They would do it again, right? Of course they would do it again, right? Because no, we have to still check off that box at the end of, and this is sometimes how we practice our deen, yeah? Not really understanding, but the peripheries have become the objective and we have to learn to go back to the understanding. What is the objective? The peripheries of it are decorations which are fine, but if we ever come to a point where a new decoration is suggested, we have no grounds to say no, because it has no objective of the religion that's being violated. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so they said, you want us to stop worshipping what our forefathers have always worshipped. The jawab of Hud in the next verse of Surah Al-A'raf is very beautiful. He says, قَالَ قَدْ وَقَعَ عَلَيْكُم مِّن رَبِّكُمْ رِجْسٌ وَغَضَبٌ. He says, Allah already anger and the rijz, like defilement of Allah, has already befallen upon you. أَتُجَادِلُونَنِي فِي أَسْمَاءِ سَمَّيْتُمُوهَا أَنْتُمْ وَآبَاؤُكُمْ. He says, you are arguing with me about things that you and your forefathers have created. Yeah, it's not that there's any proof in what you're worshipping. You've created these things and now you are arguing with us over this. And this is where we see asabiyya, bigotry has levels. On one hand, when you disagree with me, I'll shun you. On another hand, I will verbally assault you if you violate the things that I am partisan to. But then there's a higher level of asabiyya where we now act out violently against people who don't agree with us, right? And this is exactly what they did. So when he gave this jawab to say that you are arguing with me over names and things that you have made up, they got real angry at this because now Hud was insulting what their practices were. And so they lashed out at him, and they lashed out at him in a way that they were very comfortable in lashing out, and they basically beat him up. Yeah, the narrations say, فَلَمَّا سَمِعُوا ذَلِكَ مِنْهُ. When they heard this jawab from Hud, بَطَشُوا بِهِ وَحَنَفُوهُ. They basically jumped on him, assaulted him, وَتَرَكُوهُ كَالْمَيِّتِ. And they left him for dead. Yeah, they beat him up real bad, basically, right? And so they left him for dead. فَبَقِيَ يَوْمَهُ وَلَيْلَتَهُ مَغْشِيًا عَلَيْهِ. He spent an entire day and night in a state of unconsciousness from that beating. When he woke up, فَلَمَّا أَفَاقَ قَالَ يَا رَبِّي إِنِّي قَدْ عَمِلْتُ وَقَدْ تَرَى مَا فَعَلَ بِي قَوْمِي. He says that, Allah, I did what you asked. Yeah, and now you see that they in turn have done what they have done, right? So in other words, like I think he's saying to Allah, like, I'm pretty sure I've exhausted everything. They've now turned violently against me. I'm one person, they're a whole community. At this time, Allah Azza wa Jal sends Jibreel alayhi salam. فَقَالَ يَا هُودْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى يَعْمُرُكَ أَنْ لَا يَفْتُرَ عَنْ دُعَائِهِمْ. He says, Allah asks you not to stop inviting them to Him. Yeah? SubhanAllah. Allah did not take that beating of Hud to say, Hud, you've done enough. Yeah? And when you think about it, this is why I wasn't a prophet. You know what I mean? Because I would have given up. I would have been like, Allah, I've done everything. Yeah, they beat me up, they kicked me out, bas, maar kam the. Yeah, my job is done. But Allah, you see, like, this is why Nuh preached for 950 years. You know? These men of God and women of God, they're not like us. You know, we should never think like, why wasn't I selected? Like, Baba, I barely wake up for Fajr. You know what I mean? And you want me to like go and stand and fight for these things? It's not going to happen, right? And so Allah says to him, or Jibreel says to him, that Allah wants you to continue. وَقَدْ وَعَدَكَ. And Allah promises you, أَن يُلْقِيَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ رُعْبٍ. That Allah promises you that He will instill terror in their hearts. Yeah? فَلَا يَقْدِرُونَ عَلَى ضَرْبِكَ بَعْدَهَا. And they will never be able to assault you in this manner again. And so he regained his strength, and immediately he went back towards his people, preaching to them. فَأَتَاهُمْ هُودٌ فَقَالَ لَهُمْ قَدْ تَجَبَّرْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَأَكْثَرْتُمُ الْفَسَادِ. He says, you have become jabbar in this world. Yeah, you've become tyrants in this world, and you've committed a lot of fasad. It's enough now. فَقَالُوا يَا هُودْ أُتْرُكْ هَذَا. He said, stop now, Hud. Yeah, you've spoken enough. فَإِنَّا إِن بَطَشْنَا بِكَ الثَّانِيَةَ نَسِيتَ الْأُولَى. SubhanAllah. He said, we will beat you up so hard again that you'll forget the first beating. He said, right? But look at, he says, فَقَالَ دَعُوا هَذَا. He says to them, now you stop this nonsense. Yeah, like you see, like amazing courage. Yeah, this is one man against these people who are physically dominant, right? Physically dominant people. You know what I mean? And so he had this courage that was there. That's remarkable, right? And he says, وَارْجِعُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَتُوبُوا إِلَيْهِ. Turn back to Allah and seek His forgiveness. فَرَأَى الْقَوْمَ مَا لَبِسَهُمْ مِنَ الرُّعْبِ عَلِمُوا أَنَّهُمْ لَا يَقْدِرُونَ عَلَى ضَرْبِهِ ثَانِيَةً. The courage with which he spoke, it instilled fear and terror into the hearts of these people. Yeah, when Allah had said that there will be ru'b, yeah, this terror in their hearts, like how would that come? But it came from the fact that this guy is speaking with such courage and such confidence after we just gave him such a beating that it almost broke their spirit. You know, sometimes it breaks your spirit. You know, sometimes when you play sports, for example, and you dominate, but then they don't break and they still come back, it breaks the dominating team's spirit. Yeah, to say, man, we can't beat these guys, right? And it creates a doubt in them. This is exactly what happened, right? It created a doubt in them that they can't do anything and that they won't be able to do this. فَاجْتَمَعُوا بِقُوَّتِهِمْ فَصَاحَ بِهِمْ هُودٌ. They tried to like dominate in their presence, but he spoke with such courage and determination that they were forced into silence. SubhanAllah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I think there's a big lesson for here in this, okay? And this is that in the path towards God, we cannot expect ease and bed of roses that will get us towards God. Yeah? If I am determined to get towards God, I will be knocked down many times. Yeah? I will be deflated many times. Because there's obviously reasons behind this, and we'll talk about some of these. In fact, at Jum'ah today we talked about some of these reasons of why we are tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it takes effort, it takes a lot of striving to get to a point where one can be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not something that's just granted to people just like that. And this is something that many of us, just in the beginning journey of trying to get closer to God, the moment we find difficulty, we think this is not for me, right? This is too much. I can't do it, right? While others will go a certain distance, and then they will hit a wall, and they will say, you know what, this is not for me. When the expectation is that as many walls as you hit, keep climbing over them, right? Because once we come into the presence of God, it would have been worth it. It would have been absolutely worth the struggle. But that's such a special place that is not given to everyone, you know? In the journey towards, for example, like if I determine myself that I am only going to earn a halal livelihood, for example, and I'm not going to engage in anything shady, it may be that I'm faced with poverty, hardships, inability to enjoy certain of the life's pleasures, right? But that's okay. It's not that God is not aware of this. God is very well aware of this, right? But the fact that I am willing to endure these difficulties, it's something that God does not forget, right? Similarly, in my desire to be God conscious, I may lose certain friends who may not understand, right? Like, I remember when I was young, you know, there's this line that like when I had friends and then all of a sudden, you know, like you're young and then certain lights come and you tell your friends, you know what, I'm not gonna hang out here, I'm good. And I remember someone telling me really, he's like, oh, you're a Muslim now, yeah? And that was his point to me, like, oh, you now are a Muslim, right? And I was like, yeah, I guess, right? Like, I guess we can't hang out. Like, if that's what you think is going to stop us. But in our journey to become God conscious, we may lose certain friends, right? We may even lose certain believing people who may not understand why we're not hanging out with them or why we have changed. I may limit myself with certain promotions at work, right? I really believe this to be true, yeah? And I say this because, I was fortunate, you know. Like before I got into this line, I was in the corporate world, so I've experienced that a little bit, you know. And obviously now there is greater insight. But even in the corporate world, there's only a certain rank we can reach while we can still practice our deen effectively. Afterwards, we will reach a certain station where we will be asked to compromise on our deen. Small ways, right? For example, attending a Christmas party, I have to, right? Before I was a small employee, no one cared, I didn't have to attend. But now I'm in a managerial position, you have to attend these things. Or I have to take my employees out for lunch and they want to drink alcohol and I have to pay that credit card bill. Haram, we can't do that, right? Like we can't do that. And so, this is why in the journey towards God, we have to make tremendous amounts of sacrifices. And that these sacrifices are not unappreciated by God. In other words, they are very much appreciated by God. But we just have to have the courage and the backbone to make these sacrifices, right? And when we do them, Allah will add this courage that Hud had in him. Yeah? This is what Hud could have easily said, alayhi salam, but Ya Rab, I'm tired of getting beat up. Right? I'm tired of being called names. I'm tired of being insulted. I'm tired. I did what you asked. And if he had said that, like God would have been like, yeah, you did. It's not like God would have been like, no, you failed. No. Right? But that's why God chose him in the first place. Right? He wouldn't have said that. Right? But it's that commitment not to stop striving for God, that the presence of Hud alone brought fear into others. Subhanallah, right? And that's what we have the potential of, right? We have the potential as well that when we keep striving for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we too can have a similar effect, that we can have this aura about us that people will appreciate when they come into contact with us. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so Hud responded the way Allah expected him to respond. Yeah, that no matter what he went through, he kept striving, he kept moving. And he continued to preach to his people. And then he says to him, Ya qawm, قَدْ تَمَادَيْتُمْ فِي الْكُفْرِ كَمَا تَمَادَى قَوْمُ نُوحٍ. That you have sunken into disbelief, kufr, the way the people of Nuh had sunken into disbelief. وَخَلِيكٌ أَنْ أَدْعُوا عَلَيْكُمْ كَمَا دَعَى نُوحٌ عَلَى قَوْمِهِ. And he said, I would now be justified in calling down God's wrath upon you the way Nuh called down God's wrath upon his people. This is from Bihar. And they replied back in the following way. This is a very audacious reply. فَقَالُوا يَا هُودْ إِنَّ آلِهَةَ قَوْمِ نُوحٍ كَانُوا ضُعَفَاءَ. He says, O Hud, the gods of the people of Nuh were weak. Yeah? وَإِنَّ آلِهَتِنَا أَقْوِيَاءَ. While our gods are strong, he says. He says, وَقَدْ رَأَيْتَ شِدَّةَ أَجْسَامِنَا. He said, you have seen how powerful they have made our bodies. That means our gods must be stronger. And when they had reached that level of blindness, I guess you can say, this is where we now reach a point where the asab of Allah, the punishment of Allah, gradually began to descend. And this is where we'll stop for today. So tomorrow we'll continue before Maghrib tomorrow and Sunday inshallah. But we finish up the story. We now see the different types of punishments come down. What was the end of them? And then the end of the Prophet Hud alayhi salam. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the return of our Imam. We ask him to forgive the sins of our parents and loved ones, those going through difficulty, that he end their difficulty, those that have asked us to pray for them, Ya Allah accept their hajat. For our brothers and sisters in Palestine and all around the world, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bring an end to their difficulties, and that we leave this month of Ramadan as better believers than we entered it. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مسبوقة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.